Matthew 25, 1 through 13. Then the kingdom of heaven shall be compared to 10 maidens who took their lamps and met to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, 5 were wise. For the foolish took their lamps, and they took no oil with them, but the wise took the flasks of oil with lamps. And the bridegroom was delayed. They all slumbered and slept, but at midnight there was a cry, "Behold, the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the maidens rose and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "Perhaps there will not be enough for us and for you. Go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves." And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterwards the other maidens came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Therefore watch, for you know neither when the day or the hour." Friends, the word of the Lord. You know, there are a lot of famous lines that we use in our life and we like to repeat, and they serve often as a guide. And one of the great lines in our country's life was by President Lincoln. During the Civil War, they commemorated the battlefield at Gettysburg. And the story goes this way, that, well, there's a lot of stories, but that they didn't want him there. Now, if you've ever been invited to a place, wherever it might be, and they really don't want you, well, that's a tough one, isn't it? But the story goes that on the way there in the carriage, that he wrote on an envelope the Gettysburg Address. And, you know, it's been, the story went in the newspaper that day that there was a certain man that was there, and he gave a two-hour oration. All right? Do you really want to come and listen to me for 2 hours? You know, people must have been starved for entertainment, you know what I'm saying? And they wrote up the paper, the whole thing, and they said, and the president spoke for just a few minutes, that was all. In fact, there's only one picture. Photography was brand new then. There's one picture, and you could just barely make out the president. The photographer, they say, was thinking that the president was going to talk a long time. He's fiddling with his equipment and everything, and they only have him to the back, and you can't really see him. But the one address that is remembered that day is the Gettysburg Address. 77 years ago, our fathers brought upon this continent a new nation. Okay, don't ask me to do any more than that. You know, some of the great lines, like Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, "We the people." You know, it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful stuff, you know. Another one line that happened was on March 4th, 1933, during the Great Depression. Now, any of you are old enough maybe to, you know, you'd have to be at least 90. Maybe some of you recognize this, but Franklin Delano Roosevelt was on the radio. You have to remember, television didn't really come in until the 50s after World War II. And so the radio was the big thing at that time. And it was his first inaugural address to the nation. And the first words were, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Yes. And he would have the fireside chats and all that kind of thing. It was a tough time in America. People were desperately poor. You know, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And Norman Rockwell has famous paintings of some of his speeches, and I encourage you to look those up. The freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Beautiful, beautiful things. Well, great lines. I'm sure your parents have great lines too, you know. So I like to always talk about the things my mom told me, you know, and I'm sure you have your mom sayings too, you know. And I'm not sure, they're different for everyone. They have great different meaning. But these special lines in our life. In the reading from the Old Testament this morning, we hear one of the famous lines of the Bible. And the line is by the man Joshua. And Joshua was an understudy of Moses, the great man Moses. And I got to thinking about it, and Joshua is very different from Moses. Moses, he is the flamboyant one, and Joshua, well, he was a soldier, he was a leader, but he's just not very spectacular. He's kind of milquetoast, He's just not that flamboyant as Moses was. And I don't know how he and Moses got along all the time, but Joshua had led the people after Moses died. He had fought many battles. He had allotted the land to the 12 tribes. There's a time of peace, and Joshua has grown old. And he knows that, he's taken quite a few trips around the sun, and he's going to have to get off here very soon. And so he has one great line for them. And especially the leaders, the elders, that sort of thing. So Joshua speaks to everyone about all that has happened to him since Abraham to the present, and how the Lord has led them, how God has guided them, loved them, cared for them, and then the consequences of following other gods, and consequences in a person's life and in a nation's life. And it's kind of funny because up to this point, there's not what you call the individualism, all right? It's always the group. The group sins, so to speak. But Joshua is more individualistic, I think, maybe than Moses. There's this cute little side thing there. But, he talks to them. He wants them to serve the Lord and not other gods in the life of their family and in the life of their nation. And this great relationship that people is supposed to have with the Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth. Most of all, you hear it again, he encourages them to put away their idols. All this time, and you hear Joshua telling them, put these things away. They've been in the desert over 40 years, and they still have these things. They're gods from beyond the river Euphrates, when they were there with Abraham, where they all started, and also in Egypt, the gods in Egypt, and also the gods he mentions of the Amorites at that particular time. And then he delivers his most famous line at the end of the paragraph, and he says, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods of your forefathers' worship beyond the rivers of Egypt. Serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your forefathers that served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." This is his great affirmation of faith. It's really great. If you need a great affirmation of faith, this is the one. This is a great one. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Or I will serve the Lord, Maybe it'd be one of those really neat things to put in the kitchen, or out in the shop, or, wherever. I serve the Lord. That's always great. The words of Joshua have been a guiding light to many men and women, children, all people of all ages throughout the years. You can find them on the walls of homes, cross-stitched, all that kind of stuff. It's really great. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So why is that so important today? Today, we don't face the same challenges that the people did in Joshua's day. Joshua's day, they faced idols and other gods and all that sort of thing. And we don't face that today. We think that worshiping burning pieces of wood or something like that is just, stupid, hokey, that sort of thing. Just very unscientific and all that kind of stuff. But we may face even greater threats today than they faced then. And that may be a fading memory. We face being pulled away from God to other things in this life, in this world, and just not serving the Lord. You know, maybe we don't have idols that we bow down to, but there are so much other things that are offered by the world today for our time and our concern and our efforts. Joshua's words of caution to us may be ready to have a point that we are always anchored to in our life and our faith. For there is a great chance of forgetting the Lord, just not dealing with the Lord and saying, well, that's just, a day gone by. One of the things that we do here, one of the things that your leaders do, is that we maintain worship. It's called one of the great affirmations of what we do as a church, maintain the maintenance of divine worship. That we come together and that we worship the Lord. And this is so very important that we come and be together. And, we don't always get along. We don't always like each other. That's how families are, I think. But we do love each other. We're called together. Divine worship is so very important. We are to be a constant light to the world. Jesus said, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. We are that light that worships the great Lord of the universe, the great God. The God who is to be exalted above all things. The God that has first place in our lives. Who we give to the very best that we have. You and I are making a difference by coming to church on the day of worship to worship. Sometimes we may say, is it really making any difference? Yes, it makes a huge difference that we are here. It makes a difference to us, to our children, to our grandchildren, to the people of our nation. It makes a great difference. We need lines like the one in Joshua to help us stay on track and to walk that narrow road. As for me and my house, we will worship the Lord. It helps us always be ready for whatever may happen, whatever the Lord may call us to, whatever the temptation is that's pounding on our door. So we ask, am I ready? Jesus told a parable about being ready in Matthew 25. This all started with disciples asking him about the coming of the end of the age. And Jesus does tell them a few things, but his real teaching about that is don't be concerned about that. Be concerned about the work of the Father now. Those things will happen in their time. And he says, look, no one knows the day or the hour, not the angels in heaven, not the Son of Man, only the Father. But he says, be ready. Be ready all the time. And Jesus tells them the parable of the 10 virgins. And Jesus loved telling parables in the settings of regular everyday life. And one was about a wedding that happened in this village, and I'm sure that it probably happened to Jesus. And, to be prepared. On that day of the wedding, no one works. It was a day of rest. And if you've ever farmed, you know that having days of rest are a wonderful thing when you don't have to go out and throw hay bales and you don't have to do all the other stuff. And it's just wonderful. You still got to milk the cows, though, But on the day of the wedding, it was a great day. And they're waiting on the wedding to begin. And the wedding begins, it's a little different than the way we do it here. The wedding begins when the bridegroom shows up. Well, the virgins are there with their lamps to light the hall in the evening. And the lamps were probably about yay big, and they looked like Aladdin's lamps. You filled them with oil, and there was a little hole in the top, was kind of open here, closed off, and you had a little wick, and you lit it, okay? Those were the lights, all right? So they're expecting the bridegroom to come in the afternoon so they can party all night, right? The bridegroom doesn't show up till midnight. Now, I don't know about you, but I'll bet you his mother was ready to kill him. Have you ever been to a wedding where the bride and the groom don't show up at the right time? So I'm in New York one time, and I'm doing this wedding. So we do the wedding, everything's fine. We go to the reception, we're supposed to eat supper. I have 2 little kids and a spouse, wife, and the bride and the groom decide they're going to ride to the reception in like 1930 A4s, okay? It takes them hours to get there. I finally wait so long, I take my family out to eat at the local restaurant and then come back. And they still haven't shown up. Shoot, must be my friend. We'll let it, I didn't preach fast enough. That's the problem. Oh, rats. That's my friend. He has Alzheimer's. What can I tell you? No, I actually does have Alzheimer's. But anyway, I'll get to him later. So they finally show up. So I'm thinking, great, we're going to eat. You know, I already taken my family out. I'd come back. We're all sitting there. Well, the bride and the groom decide to go into the side room and have toast first. They are there in half an hour. I never wanted to kill someone more in my whole life. I thought his mom was going to end it all right there, you know. Oh, well. So, but this groom in Jesus' story, for whatever the reason, he doesn't show up till midnight. So no wonder the other girls, their oil ran out. You know, they probably weren't thinking, this guy is supposed to show up, 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and we're supposed to go in, and we're going to party and dance, and the band's there, all that kind of stuff. And this is the parable that he tells them. In Jesus' parable, the wedding is going to occur, but the virgins, they don't take enough oil, half of them, 5 of them. So 5 took more than enough, 5 took, just what they needed, they thought they needed. So they said, share with us and, we'll have enough. And they said, no, that might not happen. The wedding might go on till way in the morning, So the virgins go out and they buy some more oil and they can't get in. Well, the disciples wanted to know when the end of the world would come. They wanted to know when the day of the Lord would happen. Instead, Jesus tells them, look, just be ready. That's all. Perhaps today, more than ever, Jesus calls us as the church to be ready, to be prepared in the course of everyday life, what we do, how we live, that we should pray every day, that we should have this great relationship with the Lord, that we should throw off things that bind us to sin, that we should be about the Lord's work in the world just simply because he has asked us to. All too often we put it off till tomorrow. I'm too tired, I have too much work, I'm too busy, I want time for me, whatever. Whatever it is, let us be ready in all the ways that we can be. Let us be about the work of the Lord. Joshua would have said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. In whatever way you can, use your strength, your imagination, your intelligence, your love to serve the Lord and to do the Lord's work. Amen. Friends, let us bow our heads in a word of prayer. Well, Father, we give you thanks for this day, this time, that we may always be ready and striving to work for you in all that we do. And we give you thanks. We give you thanks for Joshua and all that he did. And be with us now, O Lord.